"Get out. This house belongs to me now." Those were the words my own son spat at me as he tossed a duffel bag onto the driveway of the home I'd built with my own hands over 40 years ago. The $10 million estate in Westchester County that had been the backdrop to birthdays, holidays, and a lifetime of memories was now apparently no longer mine. I stood there, stunned, as my son Brandon slammed the door in my face, leaving me alone in the crisp October air, with nothing but a bag of hastily packed clothes and the crushing weight of betrayal. It had been exactly 3 months since I lost Martha, my wife of 46 years, the love of my life, the woman who'd helped me build Henderson Architectural from a struggling one-man firm into one of New York's most respected boutique design companies. 3 months of waking up to an empty bed. 3 months of silence in a house that once rang with laughter. 3 months of grief that settled into my bones like a winter chill that wouldn't lift. Brandon had flown in from California for the funeral, of course. He gave a beautiful eulogy, words about family and legacy that now tasted like ash in my mouth. He'd stayed for 2 weeks, helping me sort through Martha's belongings, holding my shoulder when the grief became too heavy to bear alone. Or so I thought. "Dad, you should sign these papers," he'd said one evening, sliding a stack of documents across the kitchen table. "It's just some estate planning to protect the house from taxes. Mum would want us to be smart about this." I remember looking at those papers through tears that seemed permanent these days. I trusted my son. Why wouldn't I? I'd signed where he pointed, too numb with grief to question or read the fine print. Too destroyed by loss to realize I was signing away everything I owned to my only child. "Mr. Henderson?" A voice pulled me from my thoughts as I sat on a bench in the park across from what used to be my home. It was Miguel, their gardener now. "Sir, are you okay?" I saw what happened. Miguel had been tending our gardens for 15 years. He knew Martha's favorite roses, knew which hedges I liked trimmed just so. Now he looked at me with a mixture of concern and embarrassment. "I'm okay, Miguel," I lied, my voice cracking. "Just a little misunderstanding." "Sir, this doesn't look like a misunderstanding. Do you have somewhere to go?" I didn't. That was the truth of it. At 72 years old, I found myself suddenly homeless. My few friends were scattered, some snowbirding in Florida, others in retirement homes. Martha had been my world, and after her passing, I'd retreated further into isolation. "I'll figure something out," I said, though I had no idea what. The company had been sold when I retired 5 years ago. The proceeds and my savings had gone into the house and investments that were apparently no longer mine. Miguel shifted uncomfortably before saying, "My cousin runs a small motel down in Yonkers. It's not fancy, but it's clean. Maybe you could stay there while you sort this out?" That night, in a motel room with faded wallpaper and a mattress that sagged in the middle, I finally read the copies of the papers Brandon had left in the duffel bag. It wasn't just the house. He'd somehow gotten me to sign over everything. My bank accounts, investment portfolios, even my car. A power of attorney that had been used to drain me of every asset I'd spent a lifetime building. I called him, of course. The phone rang and rang before going to voicemail. I left messages that started calm and ended in tears. I emailed, I texted. Nothing. The next morning, I used the motel's ancient computer to research elder law attorneys. The consultation fees made my heart sink. With only a few $100s in my wallet, I couldn't afford proper legal help. But one name caught my eye, Sophia Chen, who advertised free consultations for seniors facing financial abuse. "Mr. Henderson," she said when I met her at a coffee shop near the motel, unable to afford her office consultation. "What you're describing is elder abuse, plain and simple, but proving it won't be easy, especially if you signed the documents." "He's my son," I said, the words still not making sense in my mind. "My only child." "Unfortunately, that's often how it happens," she replied, her eyes kind but realistic. "Do you have any idea why he'd do this now? Has something changed in his life?" I started to shake my head, then stopped. He mentioned some investment opportunity in California, something about a tech startup that needed capital. He said it was going to make him millions, but he needed seed money. Sophia wrote something in her notepad. That could be important. If he's taken your assets for a specific purpose. She looked up. Mr. Henderson, I can help you, but we need to move quickly. Assets like these can disappear in days. As I walked back to the motel, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I opened it to find a photo of Brandon standing in my living room, Martha's living room, with 3 strangers in expensive suits, champagne glasses raised in a toast. The caption read, "Closing the deal. Thanks for the investment, Dad. You always said family comes first." I felt something shift inside me then. The grief that had paralyzed me for months suddenly crystallized into something harder, something sharper. I would get my home back. I would reclaim what Martha and I had built together, and my son would learn that betrayal, even from blood, comes with a price. I spent 7 days in that motel, watching my meager cash dwindle with each passing night. Sophia Chen worked on my case pro bono, but legal wheels turned slowly, too slowly for a man with nowhere to go. I'd taken to walking past my house each morning, watching as unfamiliar cars pulled in and out of the driveway. Men in expensive suits, women with designer handbags, all there to meet with my son, who was apparently using my home as headquarters for whatever venture had been worth destroying his father for. On the 8th day, something changed. The stream of visitors stopped. Instead, a moving truck appeared, and men began loading furniture, my furniture, into its cavernous hold. I watched from behind a tree across the street, my heart pounding as I saw my life being packed away piece by piece. "Mr. Henderson?" A woman's voice startled me. I turned to find Sophia Chen standing beside me, a concerned look on her face. "I was coming to see you at the motel. What are you doing here?" "They're taking everything," I whispered, my voice catching. "He's emptying the house." Sophia's expression hardened. "This is good for us, actually. It shows liquidation of assets. We can use this." She placed a hand on my shoulder. "But I have better news. I found something in the paperwork you gave me." We walked to a nearby cafe where she spread documents across a small table. "Your late wife was smarter than any of us," she said, pointing to a clause in Martha's will that I'd never noticed. "She created a trust for the house that would activate upon her death. It specified that while you would retain lifetime rights to live there, the property itself would be held in trust for both you and your son, with a stipulation that it couldn't be sold without signatures from both trustees, you and a bank representative." "But he did sell it," I said, confusion clouding my thoughts. "He kicked me out." "He tried to sell it," Sophia corrected, a small smile playing at her lips. "He forged your signature on documents, but the bank trustee never signed off. The sale isn't valid. The buyers, whoever they are, don't know that yet, but they will soon. My paralegal discovered this yesterday when she contacted the bank. For the first time in days, I felt a flicker of hope. So the house is still legally mine? Half yours, half in trust for eventual inheritance. But yes, you have the legal right to live there for the rest of your life. Martha made sure of that." Sophia squeezed my hand. "Your wife was protecting you even after she was gone." Tears welled in my eyes. It was so like Martha, always thinking ahead, always making sure the details were handled. She'd known somehow. Had she sensed our son's intentions? Had there been signs I was too blind to see? "There's something else," Sophia continued, her expression growing more serious. "I had a colleague look into this investment of Brandon's. It appears to be a scam, a sophisticated one, but a scam nonetheless. Several other wealthy individuals have been approached about this same opportunity. The FBI has an open investigation." My stomach dropped. "So he's being conned, or he's part of it. We don't know yet, but either way he's in trouble." She gathered the papers. "We need to move quickly now. I've filed emergency motions to freeze any transactions related to your property and assets. We should hear back by tomorrow." I spent that night staring at the motel ceiling, thinking of Brandon as a child, the little boy who'd ride on my shoulders, who'd crawl into our bed during thunderstorms, who'd beam with pride when I attended his baseball games. Where had that boy gone? When had he turned into a man who could look his grieving father in the eye and steal everything from him? The next morning brought rain and a phone call that changed everything. "Dad?" Brandon's voice sounded different, smaller, frightened. "Dad, I need your help." I said nothing, just listened to his breathing on the other end of the line. "They're not who they said they were," he continued, words tumbling out in a rush. "The investors, they're not legitimate. They've taken all the money, everything, and now they're threatening me. They're saying I'm liable for the full amount since I brought them the deal. Dad, they're saying they'll hurt me if I don't pay them back." Still, I remained silent. "Dad, please. I know what I did was wrong. I was desperate. This was supposed to be my big break, my chance to finally make something of myself instead of living in your shadow. But it all fell apart, and now—" His voice broke. "Now they're here at the house. They're saying they own it, but something's wrong with the paperwork. They're angry, Dad, really angry." I closed my eyes, seeing Martha's face in my mind. What would she tell me to do? The answer came immediately. She would tell me to protect our son, no matter what. "I'll be there in 20 minutes, I said, my voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside me. "Don't let anyone leave." The taxi dropped me off a block away from the house. The rain had intensified, soaking through my jacket as I walked the familiar path home. Through the gates, I could see several cars in the driveway, luxury vehicles with tinted windows. The moving truck was gone. As I approached the front door, it swung open. Brandon stood there, his face pale, eyes red-rimmed. Behind him, I could see 3 men in the foyer, their expressions hard and unwelcoming. "Mr. Henderson," one of them said, stepping forward, "your son has something to tell you about the ownership of this property." Brandon looked at me, real fear in his eyes. "Dad, I'm so sorry. I never meant for this to happen. I thought it was legitimate. I thought—" "Save it," I cut him off, stepping past him into my own home. The familiar smell hit me, Martha's favorite potpourri still lingering in the air. "Gentlemen, I think there's been a misunderstanding about this house." The tallest of the men smiled coldly. "No misunderstanding. We bought this property from your son. The deed has been transferred. We've paid in full." "Actually," I said, reaching into my pocket for the papers Sophia had given me, "you haven't bought anything. And you're currently trespassing in my home." As I handed them the trust documents, I saw Brandon's expression shift from fear to confusion to dawning realization. His scheme had unraveled not because of anything I'd done, but because of Martha's foresight. Because she'd known our son better than I ever had. The men's faces darkened as they read. One pulled out a phone and stepped away to make a call. The atmosphere in the room grew tense, charged with unspoken threats. "We should call the police," I said calmly, though my heart was racing. "I'm sure they'd be interested in this situation, and perhaps the FBI as well." At the mention of the FBI, something changed. The men exchanged glances. The one on the phone ended his call abruptly. "This isn't over," the tall one said, handing the papers back to me. "Your son made promises, guarantees." "My son," I replied, looking directly at Brandon, "doesn't own this house. Never did. And whatever arrangements you made with him are between you and him. Now, I'd like you to leave my property." To my surprise, they did, filing out silently, casting venomous glances at Brandon as they passed. When the door closed behind them, my son crumpled to the floor, his head in his hands. "Dad," he sobbed, "what have I done? What have I done?" I looked down at him, this stranger who was my child, and felt nothing but emptiness where my anger had been. "I don't know, son," I said quietly, "but I think it's time you told me everything." The rain continued through the night as Brandon poured out his story in my living room. The magnificent space that had once hosted charity galas and Christmas celebrations now felt like a confessional. With my son hunched forward on the sofa that Martha had chosen, his voice barely audible above the storm. "It started 6 months ago," he said, not meeting my eyes. "Before Mom got sick, I met these guys at a networking event in San Francisco. They said they were venture capitalists looking for investors in a new quantum computing startup. It sounded legitimate. They had credentials, references, a working prototype. I listened silently, noting how he said "Mom" instead of "your wife," as if trying to remind me of our connection. I invested everything I had. My savings, my 401k, even took out a second mortgage on my condo. $2 million gone. He ran his hands through his hair, a gesture so like Martha's that it made my chest ache. Then they said they needed more capital to close a major deal with the Department of Defense. 10 million more. That's when I started thinking about the house. About stealing from me, I corrected quietly. He flinched, but nodded. They promised I'd triple my investment within 6 months. I thought I could buy back the house before you even noticed what happened. I convinced myself it was temporary, just moving assets around. And when your mother died, his face crumpled. It was the opportunity I needed. You were so grief-stricken, so trusting. I told myself I was protecting you from financial worries during your mourning, that I was handling things like Mom would want. A bitter laugh escaped him. What a joke. She knew, didn't she? That's why she set up that trust. She knew I couldn't be trusted. The truth hung between us, heavy and unavoidable. My wife had loved our son, but she hadn't been blind to his flaws, his desperation to succeed, his shortcut-seeking nature, his envy of the business I'd built. She'd protected me from him without ever saying a word. 2 days ago, they told me the Department of Defense had pulled out. Brandon continued. The whole deal collapsed. That's when I realized there was no deal. No quantum computing breakthrough. Nothing. Just an elaborate con. He looked up, his eyes hollow. I tried to back out of selling the house, but it was too late. They'd already taken control of all the funds, and when I threatened to go to the authorities, they threatened me right back. Said they'd implicate me, make it look like I was the mastermind. And you might have been, for all I know, I said, the words sharper than I intended. Dad, please. I know what I did was unforgivable, but I was desperate. These people, they're dangerous. They've done this before. They find someone with access to wealth, make them complicit, then take everything. I stood up, walking to the window to watch the rain lash against the glass. Martha and I had designed this house together, planned every detail. The large windows in the living room had been her idea. She wanted to always see the gardens she lovingly tended. Now those gardens were overgrown after just 3 months of neglect. Did you ever think about what would happen to me? I asked, my back still to him. Where I would go, how I would live. Silence answered me, more telling than any words could be. I thought not. I turned to face him. Your mother is gone, Brandon. I have no one else. I'm 72 years old. Did you think I could just start over? I wasn't thinking clearly, he whispered. I was drowning in debt, in failure. These men made me believe I could fix everything with one big score. He looked up at me, tears streaming down his face. What happens now? They'll come after me. After us. First, I said, reaching for my phone, we call Sophia Chen. She's already involved the FBI in this matter. Brandon's face paled further. The FBI? Dad, no. If I testify against these guys, you don't have a choice. I cut him off. This isn't just about you anymore. How many other people have they scammed? How many other families have they destroyed? The next 48 hours passed in a blur of legal meetings and FBI interviews. Agents swarmed the house, collecting evidence, taking statements, setting up surveillance in case the men returned. Brandon, as it turned out, wasn't their first victim-turned-accomplice. The scheme had been operating for years, targeting wealthy families during times of vulnerability, death, divorce, illness. Sophia Chen proved invaluable, navigating the complex legal waters, working to restore my access to the bank accounts and investments Brandon had drained. Some of the money was already gone, transferred overseas through a labyrinth of shell companies, but the house, at least, remained mine, protected by Martha's foresight. On the 3rd morning after Brandon's confession, I found him in Martha's garden, awkwardly pulling weeds from around her prized roses. You're doing it wrong, I said, kneeling beside him despite my creaking knees. You need to get the root, or they'll just grow back stronger. He watched as I demonstrated, carefully working the weed free from the soil. "Mom tried to teach me once," he said softly. "I didn't have the patience." "You never did," I agreed, moving to the next weed. "Not for the slow, careful work. You always wanted results immediately." We worked in silence for a while, the morning sun gradually burning off the lingering dampness from the rain. "The FBI agent said I might avoid jail time if I cooperate fully," Brandon finally said. "Testify against them, help identify other victims." I nodded. "Sophia thinks so too. But I'll lose my job, my reputation, everything." "Yes," I agreed simply. "Actions have consequences." He looked at me then, really looked at me, perhaps for the first time in years. "I don't know how to fix this, Dad. I don't know how to make this right." I sat back on my heels, surveying the garden. It would take weeks to restore it to what it had been, months maybe. Patient, consistent work, day after day. "You start by accepting that some damage can't be undone," I said. "You acknowledge the harm you've caused, and then you begin the long process of rebuilding, not what was, but something new. Do you think you could ever forgive me?" His voice was small, childlike. I thought of Martha, of what she would say. She had always been the more forgiving one, the one who believed in second chances. But she had also been the one clear-eyed enough to create legal protections against our son's worst impulses. "I don't know," I answered honestly. "Forgiveness isn't something you're owed, Brandon. It's something you earn over time, with actions, not words." He nodded, turning back to the weeds. We worked side by side as the morning aged into afternoon, not speaking much, just gradually reclaiming small patches of order from the chaos. That evening, as Brandon slept in his old bedroom, now effectively a guest in the home he'd tried to steal, I sat in Martha's reading chair, a glass of her favorite bourbon in my hand. "You knew," I whispered to the empty room, imagining her there. "You saw what I couldn't." The FBI had frozen the assets of the scammers, recovered some of the money, but millions were still missing. Brandon would likely avoid prison, but face years of legal consequences, financial ruin, and the destruction of his career. And I would have to decide what kind of relationship, if any, I could rebuild with my only child. The house felt different now, no longer just a repository of memories, but a place marked by betrayal and, perhaps someday, redemption. Martha had left me one final gift in protecting it, the chance to decide for myself what forgiveness would look like. I raised my glass to the empty chair across from me. "I miss you," I said to the silence. "I miss your wisdom." The next morning, I found Brandon already in the garden at dawn, methodically working his way through the weeds, getting each one by the root, just as I had shown him. It was a small thing, almost meaningless in the face of all he had done, but it was a beginning. "I made coffee," I said, holding out a mug to him. He took it, our fingers brushing briefly. "Thanks, Dad." We stood together in the garden Martha had loved, the rising sun casting long shadows across the grass, illuminating the path forward one step at a time. Not forgiveness, not yet, but possibility. And for now, that would have to be enough.